All right, we're back. We're here talking about "Place to Call Home," a song that was on Badlees' album "Epiphones and Empty Rooms" from 2013. My fact checker, Nyke Van Wyk, looked it up.
It is indeed.
We have Nyke Van Wyk with us today, who played all the string parts on "Place to Call Home." Usually, I'm trying to break these up into 5 parts. The first part I already did on a previous video, which was about the songwriting, which took me a little bit. Other parts, songwriting, pre-production, recording, mix, master. 5 sections. So the pre-production of this song, was non-existent. We didn't do any. This song has never been performed live. It's long, it's slow, pretty epic, and we never really performed the song live, and Nyke has reminded me of that today already, that we're going to do that at some point. So there really wasn't much pre-production, and when we got into the recording session, the lion's share of the recording was done, well, I think all the recording at that time was done at the Saturation Acre Studio up in DuPont, PA, and players on it. Ron Samosik played drums, Paul Smith played bass, Dustin Douglas played electric guitars, I played acoustic guitars, some electrics, sang. Nyke Van Wyk did all the violin parts, which we're going to talk about in detail here in a little bit, and I believe Freeman White played on this. Freeman White played keyboards and B3 organ. And that's the personnel for the recording. So basically no pre-production. Oh, and Tony Halchik helped out with the engineering, as I remember. So we got into the recording. We just, same thing, started, guitar, basically acoustic guitar, vocal, drums, building the track up piece at a time. Pretty stock way of doing it. I mean, the song was, there was a lot of instrumentation, so there really wasn't a lot of people playing live. We were doing it piecemeal. But the piece de resistance of this song, besides all the other great playing that went on, was Nyke Van Wyk here and his super cool string arranging techniques that he does.
You do the arranging too.
What's that?
But you do the arranging as well.
Well, yeah. Well, see, the thing that what Nyke will do is like he will build little string orchestras by himself. So it kind of allows somebody like me or somebody that like that's more of a rock background or rock or pop background, that you can bring in one guy and meticulously, one part at a time, you can build up these little mini orchestras in the software, in the recording process, and kind of come out with something that sounds, that's not just putting your hands on a synthesizer. You come out with something like much richer and much more organic sounding. Yeah. The key to this, for me, the great thing about what Nyke does is he can think like a rock or a pop musician. Usually like a rock musician would just they would get people together and they would kind of just kind of work it out on the spot and like sing parts to each other maybe, or just noodle around, and then they would record. Typically, when you're dealing with string players or an orchestral situation, you're dealing with someone who is used to having
sheet music.
Yeah,
everything notated out in front.
Everything notated out in front of them.
Not only from the notes they play, but how they play the note.
Well, sure, all the articulation and all the performance notes.
Yep.
And in the case of this, it's just a lot easier to work when you can work with somebody that can think like a guitar player. I can go play. You can play. Whatever it was. There you go. There it is.
Is that here?
Yeah. Okay. But and I can just say that, and then I'll say, okay, now play that 8 times or 6 times. Sometimes you like 6 and 8.
I like 6. Yeah.
Yeah, 6 is And then we'll maybe do a little harmony to it.
Yep.
You know, we'll do a little harmony to it. Maybe do a third part, maybe like a tension
octave.
part on top or an octave.
Yes.
And we build these parts up one at a time, and it takes a long time. But it's super cool. You know, usually, like we were saying, you know, usually a string player, you're dealing with someone that needs a chart in front of them, and they want to sit there and they want to look at the chart, and they want to play the chart. If you notate a lot of things that are played in pop music and rock music, it's very simple. You know, like the parts, to my understanding, most of the time, the parts are very simple. You know, if you put them on notation and you put them in front of somebody that's a serious string player, you know, I've done it before where I've hired string quartets and brought them in and had the charts made of what I wanted played, and they got the charts and they looked at them and they started laughing. You know, because this is like, a lot of it's like pretty much high school level. I'm not talking about what you're doing in that room.
No, I know
what I'm saying as far as like the actual notes and the rhythms that are pretty basic.
Yeah.
But the you know, like a string quartet would like look at it and start laughing, you know, because it was so simplistic.
Yeah.
But you know, an hour into the session, they're not laughing anymore. You know, because
Intonation and
right,
the ability to play the same parts, and yeah.
Intonation and being able to play, being able to, because like in pop music, you got to be able to play with feel. It's got to be impeccably, and it's got to be in tune.
Yep. Especially if you're gonna overdub.
Right, if you're going to overdub yourself,
Yeah.
it's got to be crazy in tune. Whereas, you know, maybe if you have a little bit more play and a little more leeway, you know, in an orchestral situation with the tuning and the timing, because you're kind of following a conductor,
Mm-hmm.
you know, and he's kind of, you know, controlling that side of things. Whereas, you know, in the case of A Place to Call Home, you know, I mean, it was cut to a click track. The timing was rigid. So, you know, it was fixed. So you have to be able to play to a strict time and a strict tuning.
I've played with guys who they're phenomenal when it comes to playing on paper, and as soon as you say, oh, just play this, like we were saying, if you just play like a couple notes or put something together in this time frame, you know,
Right.
just make up a melody, they look at you like you have four heads because they don't know how to do it if it's not written in front of you.
It's not
and
written.
again, it's like if it's not everything dictated from notes to, you know, crescendos here, accents on here, and then you try to make them, you know, I've worked with a group out of Montclair, New Jersey, and it was a set of six violinists and six cellists, and they were able to do what we do, and they were all impeccable players, but they kept overdubbing. So you took those six strings, the six violins, the six cellos, and then it sounded like 12 of each, and then eventually 24, blah blah blah. But they were also in the same boat where it was a lot of practice of that. But if you take just like an ensemble that's been working together but not in a studio situation, and you put them in there, as far as putting them up against mics and being able to play, it's a whole different world. They don't know. They don't know where to start. It's, you know, and like you said, something as simple as just playing something we would consider pads, just whole notes over measures, becomes increasingly difficult for them. As soon as you have to play to a click, you have to play a certain feel and kind of go with the dynamics of the song and listen to things that haven't been dictated before.
They're not. Yeah. Very well put. That's why I have you here. But
Pay me the big bucks.
I pay you the big bucks to come in and do that. but yeah, I'll add on to that is like, you know, Nyke can read very well. You know, I mean, I can read music as well, but just in the context of making pop music or making rock music or folk music or things like that, it's
also because it's like, it goes from the creative process to the recording process like that. It's not like when you're dictating music to be written into notation. Now you have to give it to an arranger, and you have to, or even if you're arranging it yourself, now you're like, okay, this sounds cool, let's put this in, and then you got to write it all out. And then once you get those players in, if you go, you know what, I like it, but I want to change this, or I want to do this, you know, it's easy for them to pick up a pencil. But if you're doing that for the entire length of a song, what could be like a 3 to 4 minute song, and then especially if you're doing overdubs or anything else, that becomes quite a long process. So. And I think that's how we started. Was I came in with a laptop once.
Yeah.
When we were recording on the album, and I had a laptop. I kind of dictated everything else, and we got about halfway through it, and I was like, let's put the laptop outside and just go. You know.
Yeah.
We hear this, record it, boom, and we're in. So the creative to recording process is much quicker when you're not worrying about like notating and dictating.
Right.
So.
And on the other side of that, the thing was that I thought was really cool is like that time we did that thing, that track, that additive track that Panacea did that live with the West Point band.
Yep. Yeah,
right?
The orchestra, the Allegro Chamber Orchestra.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
And it was like such a hoot to like hear the parts that you and I just sat there and went, no, 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 no.
Maybe
you know,
this'll
like
work.
like played, you know, with like 40 people or whatever, you know.
Yeah.
So like it was neat to just hear that, you know.
Absolutely.
And
which may be coming again soon.
yeah, that would be. I'd love to hear another song like that. But but the nice thing is it just to reiterate one more time is that because Nyke can do it like the guitar player sort of make it up as you go a long way, and play it in tune and play it with feel and play it in time to a click track. You're able to put that kind of classical influence and that those kind of orchestrations in a humble way into songs that are done in DuPont, Pennsylvania. So that's really cool. I mean, I grew up listening to a lot of the orchestral things that the Beatles would put in music, which I loved. And like if you listen to Billy Joel, Legend of Billy the Kid, you'll hear like major nods to Aaron Copland. And that's that.
I think that comes across in some, because I remember, I mean, a lot of times the way we work is you'll play me something and sometimes you don't have any kind of idea of what's going in there, and I'll just sit there and kind of noodle around and be like, hey, this might sound cool, and I'll go in there, put it in, that sounds cool, or let's change it, and then sometimes you have like an idea. I think even in this one you kind of like the one was kind of like an idea that you had ahead of time.
Yeah, which was kind of quoting the melody of the song. I mean, melody of the chorus.
Yeah, absolutely. So there's a lot of times where you come in with either an idea or you say, hey, I want to do something, even throwing it back to the Beatles, you're like, hey, let's do something Beatles-y kind of like here, and we'll put that in.
Yeah.
And something and that's what I like working with you on, is it's not all just coming from my mind, and then that way you can say, hey, this is what I was hearing, and then I can throw on just in any other kind of creative atmosphere. But
right. And like the same thing, like when you're making records,
the power to veto and the power to like be like, this would work. Yeah.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I might say, oh man, like let's do something like Van Morrison's Sweet Thing here, which we did in Life is Beautiful.
Yeah.
We did those little whatever. This little and so you can kind of paying tribute to little pop records that you heard over the years. Being able to put that sort of orchestral, organic element into tracks is, Nyke is one of my secret weapons for being able to do that. That's really, really super cool. Besides all the solo violin stuff, because you have a little bit different, like most violinists. I mean, that you meet in, playing in clubs and playing. There's like country fiddlers.
Yep, a lot of country and like that western kind of thing.
The western,
and
swing.
Folk.
And folk music, and then you'll run into the aforementioned classical people that need a chart.
Yep.
Like whereas you're coming from kind of like a classical / Celtic background almost.
And a lot of Jethro Tull.
A lot of Jethro Tull. That's good stuff.
Yeah.
Anyway, this particular song we have the tracks. Loaded up here. I'm not going to play the whole song here, but we'll put in the description, as always. We'll put the full track down there for you, a link for you to check out the whole song. Like I said, not for your spin class, not for the summer jam. It's long, it's slow, it's a story. Anyway, so what I'm gonna play is like the acoustic guitar and the strings that we came up with, like the intro part.
Which we haven't touched since we recorded it.
No, since we haven't listened to it since we.
I've listened to it, but I haven't played any of the parts.
Haven't played it, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah. Okay, let's see. Here we go. It's just the intro. Okay. Yeah. So yeah, like in the case of there, I hear like there's a top part
Yeah, we like to do a lot of those. Like, what was it?
which is really high.
Oh,
Like I think that's just
I think we put something
Yeah,
up there,
yeah.
and then there was a. Something along those lines we were doing.
Yeah.
Something like that. And we had those high bit. Something up there going across the top too.
I can't even remember the voicing I played. I know it was an A sus. It was like an A7.
Yeah, that was just like the songs.
But anyway, so that was kind of the intro. Yeah. Then there's kind of like that little moving sort of ostinato thing, and then there was a lower part.
Mm-hmm.
So all of those are like 6 parts a piece.
Yeah, we that's where we go into double, tripling, quadrupling, all the way
Yeah.
up to 6 or 8,
Yep.
8 tracks of the same part to give it that orchestral kind of like.
Yep.
Because even though we want to be very close in pitch, there's still, and I think that's where like you lose it with like the keyboard synths, is because you're really just kind of taking a sample and if you get some of the nicer samples are actually of an orchestra, but a lot of times it's a synthesized sound and they put a chorus on there, but it's all parallel as far as the tones go with the chorusing and everything else. Whereas even myself playing the same note over and over again, I'm never going to be in the exact same place on the fingerboard playing the exact same bow position. So those subtle differences from each track.
Yeah. So like if you're playing a string part and you're playing a triad.
Yep.
On the synth, basically you're going to hit all 3 notes basically at the same point.
Yep, and that same wave is going to hit all at the same time.
And it's going to probably over a short span of an octave, it's going to be all the same sample.
Yep.
Just kind of.
And the same waveform will be hitting on all of them at the same time. You might have a slight chorus effect,
Right.
but that doesn't give you that organic kind of like the bows are all moving and changing at different times, and
Right.
and ideally you'd want to do it with several different instruments because every instrument has a different timbre to a point and everything.
I know at times we would like, when we were doing parts, we'd like move you back.
Yep.
Move them away from the microphone.
I always kind of sway back and forth when I'm playing, so that way it kind of gives some space around the microphone, or
like just to kind of get more, some more space around the mic, so it feels like, like one player would be sitting here, and then it would be that much farther away. The source of the sound would be that much farther away from.
Yep. And then you get
people's
more
ears.
of the sound of the bow on the strings versus just the tone of the violin in the room itself.
Because the farther back you go, the more just room tone you get.
Yep.
Yeah. So these are the things geeks like us think about with recording. Like little things. Like we're trying to simulate. You're trying to simulate that there's actually an orchestra there.
Yeah, there's more than one guy in a box.
One more guy in a basement. Yeah. Let's see what the next. Unison.
Yep. What is that?
So basically quote the melody.
Looking for a place to call home.
And I believe like sometimes then the verses will break out into a solo violin, which is I think what we did here. I might be wrong.
Yep.
There it is.
There's some ornamentation in there, yeah.
Get a little bit of folky thing. Put some like little swelly guitars in there to kind of. basically that, and then the song goes down into another chorus, and then we break that back down. Last thing I'll say is like we have like a couple little tricks we do. Let me see here. Where that's not the one I want. Here's like a signature Nyke trick here. Let me take off my guitar part there. Okay, here we go. This is the lead into the outro. So like little, like the little orchestral flourishes that would be in a classical piece, right?
And the beauty of that is like it's like the beauty in the imperfectness of those
exactly
sweeps, because it's like when you start doing them, they all are separately. And I was just doing it with the guys from the Spill Canvas when we were recording, and it starts off when you start doing a sweep like that. One or two of them by themselves doesn't sound like. They're very messy, they're not really like nailing any notes in particular, but like once you start stacking 3, 4, 5, 6, and then add another octave or different like
right, yeah.
harmony.
Sometimes you add the top part, yeah.
When you hear them one at a time, you're like, it's kind of like messy, kind of. But once you stack like 6 to 12 of them, all of a sudden it's got that big orchestra swell, which again is that like imprecise kind of. Like if you were doing that on keyboard, every single note is all hitting at the same time, so you don't have that big sweeping kind of. Just feels very mechanical.
The imperfectness of it all.
Yeah.
So that I think that kind of gives you a little insight, and so.
We'll do that one more time, because I didn't know what we were going into for a second. So we're doing, what was the line again? Hold on, it goes. Okay.
Oh, I screwed up. 1, 2, 4.
That's what we were doing on top of it too. It was like a
little kind of some rhythmic. Yeah. So that's basically the special sauce for doing these string orchestras and what Nyke does. So please hire him. You can bring him for you two can have a song, have that kind of thing on your record.
You two and you two.
You two. You two themselves.
I think you two.
Bono, you can have that if you want.
But you gotta
take
call
away
him
from me.
Yeah, I was gonna say you gotta call him to get me.
I'll let you know what his schedule is.
There it is.
All right, so that's basically that's what we wanted to talk about, the recording, and that I wanted this song that was kind of like the showpiece of that particular song was the string things that we did with Nyke, and
which will someday be performed with a full symphony.
I hope so.
We're gonna make that happen. We're gonna definitely make that happen.
I hope so. And what else was I gonna say? Oh, as far as the rest of the song, it's pretty straight ahead. The recording. That covers the recording. The mixing was done on the West Coast by a guy, Joe Alexander, who actually mixed the Badlees River songs and recorded up there down here, which if you're familiar with Badlees music. And he mixed that song at an undisclosed location in Chico, California. Mm-hmm. Paul mastered it here, I believe. By that time, were you here yet? No? Somewhere. somewhere Paul mastered the
Turn
song.
the camera around, give it to me.
And did a hell of a job. So that's it for this week. We will be back next week with something. All right.